So we talked a little bit about with Brett, the offensive tackle being out for Michigan State.
Yep.
Seems like a pretty big deal, and it seems like a great opportunity. We talked about this on Hail Varsity postgame last week during the bye week edition, that I was waiting for kind of the top defensive player to step up. You mentioned Sierra, right? This feels like a Williams-Winnari eats someone alive game.
Yeah.
Because it's starting to turn that way, right?
Yes. I think Williams-Winnari and Deshaun McCullough.
Yeah.
Those are the ones I'm looking at pretty aggressively here. I think Winnari's getting better every week, every snap, he's getting better all the time. I've been really impressed with him. It seems like Coach Rule's really impressed with him as well from the audio we heard over the press conference yesterday. I also think that, I've been really impressed with Deshaun McCullough for the whole year, basically. I think he's going to play really well, and I think they can move him around a little bit so that you can I think you're going to have an opportunity to get him matched up against a left side of that offensive line that is going to be a little bit of a problem for Michigan State. So yeah. I don't know that it was a huge strength anyway. I was looking through some of their PFF grades.
Yeah, not fantastic.
No, not on the blocking side of things. Their center's really good. But in terms of their other, their guards in particular are pretty rough. And then they've got one of their other tackles, I believe it is not. Yeah, so Ramil is their best tackle by far, and he's the one that's going to be out. So you're going to have a new offensive lineman, three bad offensive linemen, and then a good center. So, listen, I'm not saying this is a gimme or anything like that. I'm still surprised that the line is what it is. I do think there's going to be some opportunities here for Nebraska's defensive line.
Well, and I think there's going to be opportunities for the pass defense, too, to really showcase how good they are, because in a perfect world and how Nebraska probably wants us to set up, Nebraska gets the ball first and puts Michigan State behind early.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to run the quarterback if you're going to be down multiple scores. And if Nebraska takes care of their business really in the first quarter, this is Nebraska's perfect game, right? Because then their pass defense, which has been pretty excellent so far, is able to take advantage. Maybe they can make some big opportune plays. And then the defensive line can feast against an offensive line that's not up to snuff.
Yeah.
So really, I kind of see this now as it grows. I can convince myself of ways that it becomes, that 10-plus margin we see with the spread. But I just don't know if you can actually, if you can firmly feel that through 4 quarters of play, if Nebraska doesn't have the opening possession and they don't score right away. I feel like it has to be Nebraska taking the lead early and taking it to Michigan State to force them into really what they don't want to be doing against Nebraska's defense.
Yeah, I don't know that it has to be. I don't think it has to be a quick start for Nebraska. What I do think is, regardless of how it starts, this is going to be a real test for Nebraska's kind of lane integrity on defense, both rushing the ball against the run and as the pass rush. Because a couple different things that I noticed from Michigan State. Number one, a lot of outside zone with cutbacks, right? Mm-hmm. So got to keep your lane integrity, got to know your assignments and stay in your assignments with a lot of outside zone with cutbacks. The other thing is Childs is really mobile. I think he's a better scrambler than Underwood in terms of staying in the pocket to make plays with his arm still.
Where do you put him to Sorsby?
Again, probably a better scrambler to throw.
Yeah.
I think
he's not a mobile quarterback. He's like a playmaking quarterback, right?
He's going to run too, and there's some design runs. His design runs and scrambles are about 50-50 split of what he's been doing this year. I will say, I think he might be more dynamic of a runner. He's a little bit more elusive, I think.
Right.
I don't know if that makes him a better runner. I think Sorsby is really hard to tackle just because of how big he is. He's basically a big linebacker, a small DN playing quarterback at 6'3", 240. He's a big guy. It's like trying to tackle a tight end. Childs isn't that. He's a little bit bigger than he was last year, but he's not that. So I do think there's some elusiveness there, maybe dynamic running ability that Underwood and Sorsby didn't have. Overall, I know we didn't see it against Sorsby. I do think Sorsby's a better passer than Childs. Childs has his moments. He's going to be inconsistent, especially down the field. I think if you force him to make multiple throws over the course of a drive, that's probably where you're going to have success. Again, it's honestly very similar to the Michigan game plan, where I think you just tackle them and make them snap it again, which Nebraska was able to do most of the time, except for the 3 explosive plays. But for Michigan State, I really do think it's a make them snap it again. You're going to give up a couple things here and there to Childs, or the running back Frazier is not bad either. Nick Marsh as a wide receiver is really good. I think that'll be an interesting matchup for the secondary. I wonder if they'll just have Sia Wright follow him around, if they'll keep Sia Wright on one side of the field. I don't really know what they prefer to do there. So that'll be interesting to see as well. But I think the big difference here is you can really get Michigan State with over the top.
So am I wrong in thinking that this is a chance for Nebraska, especially just defensive line, to show maybe their ceiling, especially in conference play? Because we saw what they can do against Akron and Houston Christian, and it's hard to judge where they are competitively with other Power 4 programs, where they are in the Big Ten. But when you go against kind of a hampered offensive line, one that's not performing very well per their PFF grades and such, it feels like it's a really good chance to say, okay, this is the best that they can play. And if we don't see that, or if you don't see what you think their potential is, does that reevaluate where they are for you?
So no, it doesn't. I do think this is an opportunity to show. Obviously, I've been high on the defensive line since the offseason. I do think this is an opportunity for them to show their playmaking in a way that they haven't always yet, with a hampered offensive line. An offensive line that I actually think, if I'm being totally honest, I think is worse than their PFF grades even are, because I think Childs bails them out of a lot of things with his mobility. And I don't think the PFF grades are accurately reflecting how often that they're getting beat one-on-one on the offensive line. I think that because of his mobility and his ability to buy himself time and keep his eyes downfield and run out of pressure, I don't think that the PFF grades are accurately reflecting the fact that they're getting beat one-on-one a lot, whether it's on runs or on pass plays. I do think the cutbacks are going to be a thing I'm really watching for a lot. They do, like I said, they run a lot of outside zone, and that creates a lot of cutback lanes if you're not being disciplined. If you are being disciplined, there's not a lot there usually. So the games I watched were Boston College and USC. I rewatched those again last night. Honestly, there was a lot of things that USC did offensively that I think Nebraska can replicate. Whether it's the over-the-top passing game where they would just kind of lose guys, like Michigan State would just kind of lose guys as they would try and pass them off from defender to defender on the back end. They would just get lost. And so a lot of times, especially on, I don't know what it's like a deep over, because it's not really as sharp as a post.
Right.
The deep over where they just kind of drag deep across the middle of the field. Those came open a lot against both teams, against Boston College and against USC. And Boston College is bad, as Brett said. So there were definitely some plays there. It was 27 regulation points. I know it ends up being 40, but 27 regulation points, which I think is a better barometer of what the defense actually is. But I mean, 27 points against BC is really bad. That's not a good football team.
Well, and then you look at what Nebraska provides in just all of their skill position talent. I think we can say affirmatively through 4 weeks of the season and 4 games that we've seen, Nebraska's skill positions are maybe one of the more elite position groups in the conference. I mean, just in terms of depth and how many characters that they have, as part of that entire unit in pass catching ability. We even saw Heinrich Harper get it right at the very end, being able to add that touchdown in against Michigan. If you have that many layers against a pass defense that is sus at best, I think you have a chance for probably some big play opportunities like you had mentioned. But I wonder if maybe Michigan State's going to try to do the Cincinnati route and just be like, hey, you got to beat us dinking and dunking. And that's going to be, I think, more of a chance to say, okay, well, we're going to see Dylan throw the ball maybe 40 times because he's going to do short out routes and shorter pass plays and different flats and that sort of stuff. But I want to see the pass catchers use that dynamic playmaking ability. I feel like this is a big Ja'Cory Barney game.
Because, to break tackles and get out.
And if they're going to say okay, well, we can't play you one-on-one, so we're just not going to give it the big play, and we're going to try to frustrate you in your pass game and try to force you into your own mistakes, it's going to come down to the playmakers making plays. So Emmett Johnson out of the backfield, Ja'Cory Barney, and even Luke Lindenmeyer, really.
So the thing for me is, I think you're right. I think Michigan State wants to play defense like that. I don't think they're very good at executing it. So from what I saw against both Boston College and against USC, they try and sort of stay in the shell. Here's the problem, though. They bite on fakes really hard. At least that was in week 2 and then week 4. So maybe they fix it over the bye week. But especially against USC, I noticed this a ton. Whether it was RPO whether it was play action, a traditional play action, or whether it was screen game, Michigan State's defense bites hard. And so that's, I think, why you get those guys that just get lost when they're getting passed off on like deep posts or overs, is I think they keep their eyes on the backfield too much. They get sucked in by whatever's happening. They seem super susceptible to eye candy from what I noticed. Like the orbit motions, all the clearing out of the backfield, bringing back guys back in like they do with Emmett Johnson all the time. Michigan State seemed super susceptible to not having good enough eye discipline to not get sucked in by whatever action, either pre or post snap, that USC especially was getting them into.
Yeah. And you're saying this about a USC team. Obviously, Lincoln Riley is the quarterback guru, and he's the quarterback whisperer. But they have a quarterback, Jaden Maiava, that is nowhere close to the cerebral ability of Dylan Raiola.
I would agree 100%. It's more mobile.
Yeah.
But they really didn't use that against him. They had one touchdown on what looked like a zone read that Maiava kept it, went around the right side, and was able to score there. I think we saw that a couple games ago where he got a first down that way. I think Dylan's mobile enough to keep you honest that way. They didn't Maiava had a couple scrambles that were impressive, but for the most part, they didn't use like Maiava mobility as a design part of the game, and they didn't really need to. I think from a precision passing standpoint, yes, Dylan is much better. Intermediate routes were open constantly. And then again, when they got sucked in by eye candy or RPO action, things like that, I thought they really, really struggled to stay disciplined on where their eyes were supposed to be. Again, maybe that's something they fixed in the bye week, but they got cooked by that by USC. And there was, whether it was wide receiver or I know with Wayman Jordan, they've got a really good running back at USC, but he is second in the league in rushing, and Emmett Johnson is third. So, we're not listen. Wayman Jordan's probably a better back, but it's not like we're talking a huge gap in terms of productivity so far this year between USC's back and Nebraska. So, I think that'll be interesting. I think you may see a lot of, like you said, Ja'Cory Barney in some of those screen actions. And then I'll be honest, I said this 2 weeks ago. I didn't see him quite as much after the first quarter as I wanted to. I think this could be a big Mosey game.
Yeah,
his versatility. If you're throwing a lot of eye candy and different things at a Michigan State defense that isn't really good at staying disciplined, I think a guy like Mosey can be really useful.
Are you taking that off of Rule saying yesterday that they figured out number 2 for their running back?
I thought that before, but that solidified it for me.
So you think he's saying Mosey?
Well, so I don't know that Mosey's number 2 in running back because he's sort of gone hybrid since Bonner got hurt, right? So I don't know that he meant number 2 in terms of. He did say it kind of strange and like, hey, we're going to do some different things and you'll see how it looks. So that sort of made me think it might be Mosey. I don't think he's going to be a number 2 back in the traditional sense of like, hey, yeah, we're trying to get him 12 carries a game. Because I do think they feel like they need to use him in the slot game quite a bit too, unless somebody like Quinn Clark has stepped up a lot in a way that, or Cortez Mills, he did bring up Cortez Mills as well, has stepped up in a way that they feel like they can be comfortable moving Mosey back from the Bonner spot back into the backfield.
Can I ask you just a philosophical question more for this game?
Always.
So I'm between 2 lines when it comes to this, right? For how you evaluate this game, because it feels like from what I came into, really Saturday, Sunday, even Monday morning, I thought that this was more of a prove-it game for Nebraska. I know you kind of said it that way, but the spread the way it is, now that there's an injury on the offensive line, you dive a little bit more into the numbers, and even hearing what Brett had to say just about from the national perspective of Michigan State comparative to Nebraska, is this more of a get-right game for Nebraska, or is it still a prove-it game?
Yeah, I don't think it's a get-right game. I think it is. I think I've said this since the offseason. I think we learn more about Nebraska against Michigan State than we do against Michigan. I just think whatever happened against Michigan, whether that was going to be a win or obviously it ended up being a loss, I think you learn a lot about your team coming back against what I do think Michigan State has their problems. They are still 3-1. And I mean, that's a Big Ten team that I think is a lot better than they were last year. I think that's a place where you can learn a lot about your team against a quality Big Ten opponent, coming off of a loss, coming off of a big emotional game with Michigan. I don't think it's a get-right game. I think it's a game Nebraska needs to get, but I don't think it's a get-right game is like Northwestern or UCLA in my mind. Michigan State's not that. I'm still surprised by the spread of this game. I really am.
Yeah, and I will continually be shocked because even Brett had mentioned that it got up to 12 that he had it like in his projections that it's like a 12-point win for Nebraska.
His projections are at 14.
Yeah.
Is what he said. It's 11.5, 12 at books right now.
Right.
He's got his at 14, which is crazy. Like
obviously I can see where Nebraska wins this game by 14 points, but when you talk about a 14-point win, that feels even bigger. Like when you're projecting a 14-point win, it feels like it's a much more significant margin than what they would win by.
It's weird to be favored by that much.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I saw a world, and I know people thought I was crazy. I saw a world where Nebraska could have beat Michigan by 14. I certainly would have been stunned if the line was 10.5 points or 11.5 points at this juncture. Like I think there's a big difference between I think Nebraska could win by 2 touchdowns, and they're favored by almost 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Like that's a very different thing to me because, I mean, when you look at, DB says this all the time, right? And I usually lose because he's better at this than I am. When he sees a line that doesn't make sense, he goes, Vegas knows something. And I go, I know better. I'll take the free money. And he usually wins. When I see a line that doesn't make sense, this line doesn't make sense to me. 11.5 points. Like I thought 6.5. I thought Nebraska just under the key number of a touchdown favorite.
Yep.
That was going into it. I was pretty confident it was going to be in that neighborhood, somewhere between 6.5 and 7.5. To come out at 10.5 and then raise to 11.5, which means bettors did not think 10.5 was enough. That to me is a huge, like blinking red lights. Like, hey, Vegas is on to something here. That to me is the biggest indicator of, I think Nebraska's matchup here is maybe better than I thought it was, and especially on the pass defense. Like Michigan State's pass defense has been a little rough.
And maybe it's that part of the game that it's almost a half helmet game, right? Because Michigan State, I think I have scars from watching the Michigan State teams of before with D'Antonio and the way that they've been able to play and kind of the way that they bully certain opponents and they always play up to certain teams. That Michigan State team is long gone, right? That program is several years back to where they are now. But I think that there's a part of it that for me, now looking in and what we're talking about and what we've like kind of dove into the numbers of just what it looks like, whether it's the PFF grades or actual statistical analysis and everything too, Nebraska has advantages on every single capacity on the board right now. And I think it's just tough for me to wrap my mind around because the past few games being Cincinnati or being like Michigan, like the real competitive Power 4 conference teams, you couldn't even say that for those 2 games. Obviously, Nebraska lost to Michigan, but you don't want to put Michigan State in the same bargain bin as Akron and Houston Christian, but it's almost getting closer to that because of the way Nebraska just appears to have the favored position almost at every single spot on the field.
I would say it's pretty close to Cincinnati.
Yeah.
In how I view them. And maybe Cincinnati ends up being better than Michigan State, but like there were a couple spots, specifically defensive tackle. Dante Corleone's better than anybody Nebraska had on defensive line.
Yep.
Is that the way it's going to end up at the end of the year? I don't know. But right now, when they played especially, Dante Corleone is better than anybody had on the Nebraska line. I think Nick Marsh at wide receiver might be the best receiver on the field for Michigan State. Nick Marsh is really good. Their receivers in general are really good. Now, that happens to be a place of strength for Nebraska at receiver, and the defensive backs happen to be a place of strength for Nebraska as well. So I do think it helps a lot that probably the biggest strength for Michigan State goes up against, I would say, if it's not Dillon, the biggest strength for Nebraska in their pass defense, right? Like that's a big advantage for Nebraska in the way this is a matchup favoring thing for Nebraska. But you're right, at every other spot, their defensive line is not scary, I don't think. Their offensive line, as we mentioned, has had its struggles and is banged up now. And Childs is probably the next closest, but he's not Dillon. More dynamic as a runner for sure, but I'll take Dillon over Childs any day of the week. Frazier's a nice back. I'll take Emmett Johnson. Like I don't know. Outside a receiver, that's probably the only spot that I can say.
But you even said it yourself that, they have the number 1 receiver that if you compared it to, who's one for Nebraska, Dane Key probably. So you'd say like Dane Key to Marsh, you'd probably pick Marsh. But if you take receiving core, you're probably at best you're saying a wash, right?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, their receiving core is really good. Like I think it's like it's McCray. I think is really good, and then number 3, whose name is escaping me right now. Look at me, I sound like such a coach. Yeah, it's 6, 3, and 4 are the guys that I really like. It's I believe it's McCray and Omar. There's an Omar in here. I can't remember his name right now. But it's Omari Kelly, Nick Marsh, and Christian McCray. They're all pretty good. Like, they really are. And so if you're giving me 3 for 3 and I'm going those 3 against Key, Hunter, and Barney, Marsh probably is the best of the 3. The other ones are probably a wash. So it's close. I mean, it's certainly close. The problem is Nebraska, even if, let's say Michigan State's a little bit better at wide receiver than Nebraska is overall. Nebraska's way better at defensive back than Michigan State is. So
the receivers aren't playing the receivers.
Yes.
So
right.
The advantage goes to Nebraska because of the defensive backs they're playing.
The advantage goes to Nebraska's receivers, even though Michigan State's group, I could make the argument, is a little better.
Yeah.
The defensive backs are so much worse, or have been so much worse up to this point, that Nebraska's receivers are going to have a clear advantage there, which I think is, I mean, that's huge.
Yeah.